Today on Law Next, Daniel Lewis was still a third-year law student at Stanford when he got the deranged idea, his word, not mine, to start a legal research company and take on Westlaw and LexisNexis. He and co-founder Nik Reed did just that, founding Ravel Law, which they eventually sold to LexisNexis. Today, Lewis is global CEO of LegalOn Technologies, an AI-powered contract review platform used by more than 7,000 companies worldwide. LegalOn recently raised $50 million in Series E funding for an overall funding total of $200 million. Lewis joins me today to share his remarkable journey, including how his startup Ravel Law helped digitize all of U.S. case law through the groundbreaking Caselaw Access Project, what he learned leading teams at LexisNexis after the acquisition, and why he believes we're now entering the most transformative decade for legal practice in generations. And of course, we'll also hear all about LegalOn and why Lewis believes it is unique among contract review technology companies. I'm Bob Ambrogi, and you're listening to Law Next, the podcast that features the innovators and entrepreneurs who are driving what's next in law. Before we get to any of that, please take a moment to hear from the sponsors who so generously support this podcast. Streamline your law firm operations with Practice Panther, the all-in-one legal case management software. Trusted by tens of thousands of lawyers, Practice Panther's easy-to-use features, such as customizable workflows, automated billing, and seamless client communications, help you accomplish more in less time. Making the switch to Practice Panther is easy with free data migration, live training, and support. Get your free trial today by visiting practicepanther.com. You didn't go to law school to waste time writing and responding to discovery requests. Never waste time on discovery again with BriefPoint. BriefPoint drafts your discovery responses and requests for documents within minutes of your first sign-in. BriefPoint is the most reliable discovery drafting solution on the market, and it works right out of the box. Get your first document drafted by going to briefpoint.ai and clicking Get Started. No credit card required. BriefPoint. Draft what matters, automate the rest. Now let's get to today's conversation. Hey, Daniel, welcome back to Law Next.
Hey, Bob. It's good to be here.
Good to see you. You were on this podcast last year, I think it was, along with Nik Reed and others talking about the Caselaw Access Project. Actually, Nik wasn't on that episode. I've had Nik on the episode too. People are already thinking, who the heck is Nik Reed? What is this all about? What's going on here?
But it's been a year. That's like dog years.
It's been
in legal tech right now.
I know it does feel that way. Nik was your original co-founder of your original venture in the legal tech field. And we were just talking actually before I started recording that you and I have been talking a lot over the years, but we go back to probably early in 2014 when I interviewed you for an article I was doing for the ABA Journal that became the cover story for the ABA Journal with your face plastered on the cover of the ABA Journal. So not a bad thing for somebody who was like, I think 2 years out of law school at that point or so.
I don't think I appreciated at the time how helpful that was to have that sort of recognition.
Yeah. So I thought I want to obviously talk about everything you're doing now and talk about LegalOn and the company you're with and the work you're doing. But I just thought for listeners' sake, it would be kind of helpful to kind of go back to your origin story in legal tech, because you kind of have an interesting one, I think. You want to share that?
Sure. So I went to law school at Stanford after working for a few years at a think tank in DC. And when I got to Stanford, one of the things I was surprised about was the state of legal technology. And it felt like the tools that we were using were very far behind the types of tools that the rest of the internet was now using. And that got me, I didn't come into law school with any interest in legal technology. I was focused on clean energy, clean tech. That's what I thought I was going to do. But I just got engaged with this problem of like, why does the technology feel so far behind? And so I started talking with professors and folks in the computer science department, and bringing a kind of a data-driven perspective that I developed at the think tank into why is this sort of data-driven approach to legal reasoning and analytics not more prevalent? And so all of that led to my first startup, which was Ravel, a legal research and analytics company. And on the one hand, we set out to take on Lexis and Westlaw and reinvent legal research, but to do it in a way that leveraged machine learning, which was starting to make big breakthroughs at the time, leveraged a data-driven approach to decision-making to help people understand which cases amongst the millions out there were actually most important and why, and how did judges make decisions, and what did they find most persuasive and why. So that was the first company I started right out of law school with Nik. We were venture backed, sold primarily into large law firms, and that was the first 5 years of my life outside of law school.
Yeah, that was it. I was thinking about this interview. I was thinking about what an interesting time that was, because it was all within a few years that Ravel Law started, Casetext started, which of course went on to get acquired by Thomson Reuters. Ross Intelligence started right around then, which didn't get acquired by Thomson Reuters, but put out of business by Thomson Reuters, unfortunately. But up until that point, there really had not been challengers to the established players in the whole legal research space. I mean, the idea of taking on, I guess to some extent, Fastcase was out there already, and there had been a couple of others that had come along over the years and disappeared over the years. But so this convergence of different startups right around the same time, all kind of taking on this issue of legal research. I mean, do you think there was anything going on in that moment that kind of caused that to happen?
I think there were some definitely macro things going on within the investing community, right, that made it possible to raise funds for that kind of business. One was that it was a few years past the Great Recession, and so venture had started to sort of poke its head back out and make bigger investments. Another was it was really like starting to be a big surge in vertical software, right? And so investors were keyed into vertical spaces where there were long established incumbents that felt vulnerable to disruption. And so, in the legal space, Fastcase had already by that point been around 10 years or so. Clearly had not disrupted Lexis and Westlaw in the way that maybe they wanted to, or maybe didn't. They were going in a different direction. And so when we went out and pitched this idea of, hey, this is a multi-billion-dollar industry, the technology is really changing quickly, there's an opportunity to do something new here that creates new ways of building a business in this category, it was in some ways an easy pitch, because the venture investors were like, yeah, all the pieces line up. This is like big industry, long established incumbents, the start of a new wave of technology that could disrupt it. And so, there was us, Casetext, Judicata, you may remember, Ross.
Yeah.
And so there was a wave of funding right in that moment of like 2012 through 2014, where several new challengers got off the ground. None of which ended up disrupting Lexis and Westlaw. Maybe we'll talk more about that.
Yeah, but it was still interesting. And it was kind of symbolic of the time. I mean, I think I've told you this before, but you sometimes when I've talked to various groups, you've kind of been my poster child for the possibilities of starting in legal tech. I mean, for a long time, again, I've been covering legal tech for 30 years, and for a long time, the status quo was that you needed to be a large and well-established company really to get any kind of a foothold in this space. And then suddenly there was this moment in time when, as you say, venture funds started flowing, and doors just started opening, possibilities started opening. I mean, the idea to me at the time that a third-year law school student could say, I don't like the way these companies do legal research. I think I have a better idea. I'm going to start a company and do it and get funding and get traction. Was pretty phenomenal, I think.
Yeah, it is kind of deranged when you say it that way, right? It's like we didn't know what we were signing up for, right? That is part of like the delusion of starting a company and being a little bit younger, not knowing what you don't know.
Yeah, deranged isn't the word I'd use. It was more exciting, I think. It was an exciting time, and it continues to be. I mean, that's still the case now that somebody can be a first year associate or a law school student or whatever else and have a good idea and and bring it to fruition and get funding for it and build it into a larger company. We see that all the time.
No, it is amazing. And you think
yeah.
about the rounds that we're raising back then, right? Our first funding that we raised was just $1 million. It felt like a lot of money at the time, but that was sort of a standard amount to raise for proving out an idea for the first 18 months or so. And cloud infrastructure had just been developed, right? Like AWS was a new service basically at the time. Strike billing was just starting at the time. We were the first users of that. There were all these tools that were making it easier to start companies at lower cost that I think also sort of accelerated legal tech, but accelerated a lot of other vertical fast companies too. And just saying, hey, with a lot less funding than it used to take, it's easier to write a check for $1 million from an investor's point of view and see how that pans out in the next 2 to 3 years.
Yeah. The reason you were on this show last year was we were talking about the Caselaw Access Project, which was this project out of Harvard's Library Innovation Lab to basically digitize all U.S. case law. And I think probably a lot of people might have thought, well, wasn't it already digitized? Well, it wasn't. Not all of it. I mean, obviously, a lot of it had been over the years, but there was a lot that hadn't been. And what was probably not well known by a lot of people about that project or about Ravel Law was that Ravel Law was a major partner in making that happen and funded the project to make it happen. I'll put the link to the prior podcast in, and people can go in and listen to the whole story of how that came about because you shared in that episode. But could you kind of quickly give us the how and the why of the Caselaw Access Project?
Yeah. So one of the core, I guess, theses we had when we started Ravel was this idea that access to case law information was becoming more accessible. It felt at the time, and this was 2012, that courts were starting to move more quickly in digitizing their materials and making access to this case law, which otherwise had lived in books, available. And that was like a key foundation for how we expected to be able to build the business of saying, okay, we'll hoover up all of this digital information that's now becoming available, and we'll ride this wave of courts becoming more digitally accessible over the next couple of years. And that will let us kind of cross over this moat of content that Lexis and Westlaw have traditionally had, where they're the only providers of trustworthy content. And within about 6 months, we had hoovered up everything that we thought existed on the internet. And we were like, man, this is not enough. It's not nearly enough. And we felt like the courts are not going to move nearly as fast as we needed them to move to sort of align with being a startup. And so at that point, we quickly started to dive deep on, well, where else could we try to find a truly like authoritative and comprehensive collection of case law? And the list was very short. It was like, you could maybe go to the Library of Congress. We talked with Stanford Law School, my alma mater, and they said, we used to have a pretty robust collection, but we've actually sold most of it off and given it away to other universities because we don't need the stacks anymore. And we ended up working with Harvard through some serendipitous connections, but they had a full, complete collection of 40,000 plus law reporter books lying around in offsite library storage units and things like that. And we were able to forge a partnership where they said, look, if you guys can fund this, we'll digitize it. We'll do the digitization work, and we'll have a sort of a joint license to this material. So Harvard can one day make it fully publicly available to everybody. And for a period of time, Ravel Law would have kind of commercial exclusivity to it. So that was the foundation of that partnership, of trying to close this information gap that we felt just wasn't going to be closed if left to its own devices. And unfortunately, I think that is still true. Like, if we had done nothing, that would have never have happened. The information would still be locked up in books today.
Right. And that commercial exclusivity that Ravel Law had passed on to Lexis when Lexis acquired Ravel Law. And basically what happened last year was the end of that period of commercial exclusivity, with the data becoming more broadly available to public uses and other development and other commercial uses as well.
Yeah.
Um,
And
yeah,
one of the things that we couldn't have predicted at the time, but we sort of knew generally, we're like, we don't know how folks will use this information once it becomes publicly available, but we're sure it'll be in interesting and creative ways that we can't even predict. And sure enough, LLMs came around. And
yeah,
so by the time that the Caselaw Access Project sort of opened up to full accessibility, Harvard was like, we've got a lot of big foundation models knocking on the door here. Like everybody wants access to this data from OpenAI and Anthropic and everybody else. So I think it's safe to assume all that data has been sucked into the large foundational models now. Unfortunately, there is still a gap that remains, which is like, how do you keep these things updated on a go forward basis in a trustworthy and comprehensive way? So that's sort of a new hill to climb, but the content is at least up to date until a few years ago.
yeah. So after you, as you say, Ravel Law got acquired by LexisNexis. You went to LexisNexis in an executive role, leadership role, and I'm kind of curious how it was going through that transition from startup co-founder, CEO to playing a role in a much larger, more established organization, and whether that at all, I don't know, kind of shaped your perspective on building legal tech products and using legal data and all of that.
It surely did. I mean, when we got acquired, we were about 35 people, had gone through lots of ups and downs as startups do, and joined Lexis, which is, 10,000 people or so. And I'm very grateful for the experience that I had at Lexis. They treated us very well. I think they were, I was shocked, honestly, by how excited they were to have us and how interested they were in adapting things that we were doing as a startup, versus saying, hey, there's a Lexis way and that's the way and you should do it our way. Instead, I found just like a very open culture to thinking about how do they take things that work at startups and incorporate them or try to incorporate them into a larger organization. So ultimately, leadership from across Ravel took on very senior roles across the whole organization. Our head of engineering became a CTO of platforms. Nik Reed, my co-founder, ended up and today is running Knowable. I got to lead several different businesses, including like a very interesting crown jewel, which is practical guidance. It's a large team of attorneys that creates content across many different practice areas. And I got to sit on the other side of the acquisition table and participate in buying several companies. So got to kind of build new muscles that I hadn't gotten to exercise at a startup. And ultimately, the experiences I had leading practical guidance and seeing how Ravel scaled from a sales perspective through Lexis's massive sales teams and distribution channels has deeply informed kind of how I think about building legal tech and building a business now in the current stage.
Yeah, I can see that Lexis would have been excited to have you and open to having you, because I think, again, it was the time, going back to what I was saying earlier about, for years, these were all kind of very established legal tech companies, legal research companies, that doing things the way they had always done them. I mean, the big innovation, for a long time, the biggest innovation was they went from dial up to on the web or something. There wasn't like a lot of innovation going on in legal research in those days. And I think the innovation was coming from Casetext, Ravel Law, others like that, who were thinking, how can we do this differently and better? And I think the market was responding to that in some ways. I mean, I don't know whether Casetext or Ravel were ever hugely successful businesses or not. I wasn't ever privy to the finances there, but I think in terms of their influence on the market, they were hugely successful, and I think they've really changed. LLMs are changing everything again, and we're in a whole different space right now. But for a long time, I think a lot of the evolution in the legal tech, legal research space in particular, and legal data and analytics space, all is driven by companies like you.
Yeah, it is. It's an interesting note. I do think in a lot of ways, sort of Ravel, Casetext, others had an outsized impact relative to the revenue we were generating, right? Like Ravel was a growing business, but we were still a small business. And Casetext, built for another 5 or 6 years before they got acquired. And And by the time they got acquired, I think they were doing $10 to $15 million in revenue. Like these are
Right.
not making a dent on like Lexis and Westlaw revenues, but I think by demonstrating new capabilities, new features, they did put pressure on the large companies to innovate in different ways, and sort of showed possibilities to customers of ways in which like new value could be created.
Daniel Lewis's journey from a law grad challenging legal research giants as a startup to working within one of those giants at LexisNexis clearly shaped his perspective on building legal tech products. But 3 years ago, he made another pivotal move, this time into an entirely different corner of the legal tech world, AI contract review. That's where we'll pick up when we return, but first, please take this opportunity to learn about the sponsors whose generosity keeps this podcast running. Practice Panther is the leading practice management software designed to help you analyze, automate, and grow your firm. Intuitive design and easy-to-use features like customized workflows, automated billing, and client portals will help you streamline your practice.
If you're still spending hours drafting complex agreements from scratch, it's time to meet Paxton. Paxton is the legal AI assistant built for firms of all sizes. It helps you find the right language, draft with precision, and handle tricky clauses, all without missing a detail. Lawyers trust Paxton to turn hours of drafting into minutes. One said, quote, "An operating agreement with 3 or 4 customizations used to take 2 to 3 hours. Now it's maybe half an hour. No long-term contracts, easy to use, and you can try it free. Get started today at paxton.ai and let them know we sent you."
Before the break, Lewis shared his fascinating journey from startup founder to corporate executive at LexisNexis. Now we're diving into his current role as global CEO of Legal On, a company that's taking a unique approach to contract review, one that combines AI with attorney-developed playbooks to help in-house legal teams review contracts up to 85% faster. What attracted him to this space, and how does Legal On differentiate itself in a crowded market? Stay with us to find out the answer to those questions and more. All right, so about 3 years ago, you moved over to Legal On as the CEO and now global CEO of the company. I mean, first of all, why don't you kind of just start by kind of telling us a little bit about Legal On? What is it? But also, what attracted you to make that move? Because it's kind of going off into a different part of the legal tech world to some extent.
Yeah. So Legal On is a business that helps in-house teams review contracts faster. And the thing that attracted me to this was while I was at Lexis leading the practical guidance team, I spent a lot of time talking with corporate legal teams. And one of the things that constantly came up was the pain of contract review. And that got me interested because it felt like the technology was starting to reach a point where different kinds of solutions were possible. Contract lifecycle management had by that point been around for, more than a half dozen years, right? It was like pretty mature at that point, and it was not solving this problem of how do lawyers actually speed up the task of contract review. When they sit down to review a multi-page contract, it can take hours. How do you cut that down into minutes? And I was very bullish on the developments of like what AI could do to improve this. And that's when I got introduced to Legal On. And so Legal On is this amazing business that had started in Japan, started by a couple corporate attorneys who had been doing contract review and had the same thought, which was like, AI is ready to start solving this problem. Let's build something. And they built a business, launched it in 2019, and it quickly started taking off in Japan. By the time I joined in 22, we were already serving about 3,000 customers.
Mostly in Japan
at
that point. Right?
Yeah, I was not sure, like, hey, is there something different about the Japanese legal environment or kind of operational culture that'll make this difficult to translate to the rest of the world? But I did my diligence and came away with a lot of conviction that it was very scalable. And so I came on to lead the expansion of the business to the rest of the world, starting with the US. And I think we've been very happy with the results and sort of the conviction of that growth. We've found that the solution does scale really well globally. And with AI making advances kind of every month, the number of things that we can do to unlock value and speed up tasks for lawyers has grown even faster than I expected several years ago. So today we're serving over 7,000 businesses around the world. And people are reporting, up to 85% time savings on contract reviews. So pretty incredible, like substantive improvements that the technology is unleashing. And we've started to expand what we do beyond just that sort of white hot pain of contract review to include a preceding step, which is matter management. How do legal teams take requests from the business, automate the collection of information, start to automate answering those requests, move seamlessly into other parts of the workflow. So I just see extraordinary potential for AI to automate like mundane, tedious tasks within in-house legal practice. And that got me very excited because I knew how much pain was there. And I love the fact that in-house legal teams care a lot about efficiency and speed. And so the ability of software and AI to deliver that, to help them move faster in ways that they instantly get kind of ROI on, is a great fit. It's very fun to be working with these in-house teams where they can get such immediate positive impact.
Yeah. So as of 2022, when you moved to Legal On, there were no shortage of contract review products on the market already. If you had gone to Legal Week that year or ILTACon that week or whatever, you would have seen. I mean, that year you would have seen exhibit hall full of other companies in this space. So what did you see in Legal On that you felt would distinguish it from what was already available on the market?
Yeah, there's three things that make us unique. So one is, at the time, there were a lot of tech-enabled services saying, hey, we're going to have a human in the loop. You send us a contract, we'll use some technology, and we'll use a human, and we'll send it back to you 24 hours later. Legal On is not that. Legal On is pure software. We put it in the hands of users, and it speeds them up. The second thing is that we have made a big investment in authoritative content that gets baked into the AI. And I really valued this from my time at Lexis and leading the practical guidance teams, where what we provide with Legal On is off-the-shelf playbooks that are deeply researched, kept updated, and thorough to cover the issues that in-house teams care about when reviewing a wide array of contracts. So a lawyer can buy our software, open up an office lease agreement that they get tomorrow, and they have one of our playbooks available. It says, hey, here's all the issues that AI is going to look for in that contract. And when we spot a problem, maybe it's language that's missing or language that's not favorable to you, we've drafted language that you can use to correct that issue. And we've drafted a practice note that explains why this matters. And if you want to make a change, just click a button and we'll use AI to make the red line for you, grounded in all of that trustworthy content. And so this totally changes both the investment that teams need to make in getting AI to provide value for them, and it means that they can trust the results in a way that you can't trust ChatGPT, which still makes stuff up. It'll make up issues, it'll make up language that's just not right. And so being able to combine AI with trustworthy content feels like a very unique approach to the market that I really valued. And the third is the attention to detail and sort of the craftsmanship that goes into the product. And I enjoyed that from the Japanese perspective of the engineering culture around attention to detail. And when you get into contracting at a surface level, it feels very simple. You're like, oh, how difficult can it be to review an NDA? It's 1 page long. But most of the value in this space is unlocked when you're looking at things that are not NDAs. You're looking at more complex master service agreements. You're looking at complex procurement contracts for buildings and energy and all sorts of stuff. And those contracts, it turns out, have tables and funky formats and appendices and all these things that can really trip up AI and trip up even the way that you make a red line and ensure that it stylistically and format fits the contract. And so when you get all of those things right, it means that a user can use the product and make changes and move on quickly. And if you don't get them right, then folks end up just spinning their wheels and having to kind of manually correct and double check everything. paying our attention to all of that kind of very nitty-gritty blocking and tackling is one of the things that sets us apart.
Yeah. To that second point about the playbooks, I'm one of those people who has a little bit of knowledge about what goes on in corporate legal departments, only because my wife worked in corporate legal departments for many years, especially on contracts. And, obviously a lot of corporate legal departments have playbooks that they've already developed and that they are quite happy with. Thank you very much. So do they want those kind of third-party curated playbooks or would they rather just be using their own?
It's a range. So, across organizations of different size, there's different levels of maturity, right? So a company with 2 lawyers might have never made the investment in having playbooks, or they might have a playbook only for one type of document that they handle with some volume, but they have no sort of resources or investment made in playbooks for a pretty broad set of contracts that they also handle on a daily basis. For larger organizations, they do typically have the time and energy and resources to invest more in playbook development. And with them, the next step is, okay, well, this lives as a spreadsheet or it lives as a Word document. And how do you turn that into AI successfully? Like, how do you turn this playbook that's written for humans into something that AI can understand the context of and perform, spotting issues and making red lines in the way that you want? And so we do both of those things, right? So we can say, hey, if you don't have playbooks, we've got off-the-shelf ones. If you do have playbooks, we've got terrific AI that can ingest those, turn it into issue spotting and redlining just the way that you like it. And you can layer these things together. So you can say, I want to use LegalOn's playbook for 80% of it, and then I'm going to layer on my own playbook and cover the last 20%. So there's different ways that folks can do this, but we're just trying to meet them wherever they are at in this sort of development spectrum of playbook maturity.
Yeah. You joined this company in December 2022, as I said, a point at which, ChatGPT, whatever, 3.5 or whatever, had just come out. I think Casetext was just kind of starting to talk about its co-counsel. Harvey was just getting started around then, now a big name in the market. How has everything that's transpired since then affected your company and even what you thought your job was going to be?
Yeah, I think when I started at LegalOn, it at the time felt like a relatively uncrowded space, and what I think the ChatGPT revolution has unlocked is just a ton of interest in legal tech, and so there are a lot more companies. There's a lot more investment flowing into the space, and one of the other things that has been quite interesting is the sort of dissolving of traditional category lines. So there's companies sort of playing in different parts of legal tech that 3 years ago, you wouldn't have guessed that they had a right to play in or had an interest in playing in. And so that we're seeing that in contracts, but you see it in other parts of the market too, whether it's legal research or something else. So it's made for a much more dynamic, competitive environment. And I don't envy customers to as large extent. Like, they've got a lot to sift through to try to figure out the array of solutions that are out there for the problems that they're trying to solve. So it's kind of noisy. It's kind of crowded for everybody out there. And I think generally that's like the upsides are better than the downsides. There's a lot of energy about legal tech right now. There's a lot of interest. I've never seen customers in the market so interested in like leaning into technology as of the last 3 years. But the downside is there's a lot to sift through.
Yeah, I guess you've come full circle and that you're back to competing against Thomson Reuters and LexisNexis again, insofar as they've gotten into contract review as part of what they're doing.
Yeah, they're not sort of primary competitors.
Right.
So I still get to be on friendly relations with the friends at Lexis.
Yeah, no, I'm sure. And I'm sure you're on friendly relations even with a lot of your competitors. But apart from how it's affected your role in the market, how has LegalOn made use of this technology?
Yeah, the countless ways, to be honest. So one of the first things that we launched was AI redlining. And it now sort of sounds expected, and we're 3 years in, but we were one of the first companies to launch this, if not the first, which was like, hey, we've got an idea about how to fix this contract. Click a button, we'll make a redline for you. And that was unlocked by LLMs having this capability. From there, we've rolled it out into many different places within the product. So AI that can talk to your contract and you can ask questions of it. You can summarize red lines that have been made. You can extract key terms. You can spot missing placeholders. You can run translations across countless different languages. So we've also injected it into issue spotting and like seeing increasing accuracy in that space of how well we can spot the complex issues across a wide array of contracts. So it's very deeply baked into a lot of our different product offerings. And at the same time, we continue to find just extraordinary value in making this investment in trustworthy legal content. That goes into everything that we do as well, which is we still don't feel like lawyers can trust kind of raw ChatGPT. And I'm still surprised that like every day there's a new story about lawyers doing something with a tool that's making up citations. People still don't seem to have learned this lesson. So the value of having trustworthy content remains, and the value of having lawyers who are evaluating and training AI to do things in a particular way yields very significant improvements over like what you can get from these LLMs just off the shelf. We see, double-digit percentage improvements in our contract review benchmark, which is a very robust set of tasks that we evaluate foundational models against. And then we can test and train to see what levels of kind of overperformance we can yield through our combination of AI and engineering on top of it.
Yeah. As you've explained, your technology basically combines AI with these attorney-developed playbooks. How do you ensure that those playbooks, apart from any issues of hallucination or whatever, remain up to date and precise and compliant and whatever else needs to be considered there?
Similar to how things like practical guidance or practical law at Lexis or Westlaw are run, right? So we have a team of attorneys, all experienced in-house practitioners with specializations in different areas, whether that's data privacy or construction or service agreements. And that team both drafts the initial playbook and then maintains it and checks in to make sure that, as data privacy laws change on a state-by-state basis, we make changes to the DPA playbook, things like that. So it's a twofold motion of both building new things with the right expertise and then maintaining them as laws and market standards change, but having humans doing that work and applying their judgment.
About a month ago, announced that you had raised a $50 million Series E, and also announced around the same time that you had entered into the strategic collaboration with OpenAI. So I wonder if you could talk about what those developments mean. And we're speaking now, it's end of August 2025. This is just about a month ago, around the end of July 2025. What's the significance? What do those mean for your customers, for the market in terms of that investment and your partnership with OpenAI?
Yeah, so the $50 million raise was led by Goldman Sachs. It was our Series E round. So now we've raised around $200 million in total. Our team is about 600 people globally, and we're using the funding to invest in continued global growth and in continued leading edge R&D around AI and feature development. So yeah, at that point, it puts us, I think, as like the most well-funded AI company for in-house legal teams. And we feel really excited to have great backers in Goldman Sachs. They were invested in our last round. They know the market really well. And our partnership with OpenAI is a deepening of a technical engagement that we've had for several years. We've been using OpenAI models from the earliest days. And as we test different models against our contract review benchmarks, we've consistently found that OpenAI is sort of leading for the use cases that we have. And so by going deeper with them, we're getting sort of earlier access to models as those come out and more side-by-side development on leading edge features with their engineering team. Like I mentioned, I think we continue to find that we don't think the right investment is to build a foundational model ourselves. Mm-hmm. Instead, it's to say there's lots of opportunities to take these foundational models that continue to get better and better and layer on top of them things that go deep on the legal space. And so that's where we apply our focus, but we get some insight from OpenAI about what's around the corner, agentic tools that we can leverage, ways to bake in legal specific knowledge that yield better results for this kind of professional use case.
Yeah. Could you talk a little bit about how you will weave in agentic tools? I mean, that was a big, when you made this announcement a month ago, that was a point of focus, at least in the press release that went out, talking about the fact that some of this will be going towards developing AI agents or further developing AI agents. So how are you, or how do you plan to be incorporating AI agents into your product?
Yeah, so we have several that are in development, in various stages of development and launching soon. I'll give you a couple of examples of them. So one is a playbook agent designed to take a customer's playbook that might exist as a spreadsheet or as a Word document and rapidly transform it into LegalOn's AI. And this is a really interesting process because that playbook is written for humans, and it'll say, here's our position on some sort of red line, for example, or here are the issues that we like to look for in a particular kind of contract. Maybe it includes fallback language or model language. Maybe it's been sort of patched together over time in different formats and different levels of thoroughness. But our agentic approach can take that and rip it apart and say, hey, here's what we understand is in this document. Here's the instructions that we think you're looking for, the issues that you're trying to spot. Here's the fallback language that you've articulated, or the model language or escalation clauses that you have. And we're going to rip it apart. We're going to present it back to you. We're going to ask questions to make sure that we clarify any ambiguities. And we're going to say, does this look like what you intended? Is this how you want the playbook to be turned into AI? The user can confirm that, click a button, and it's now ingested into LegalOn and ready to use. So typically, like, playbook conversion can take several weeks, depending on the size of that playbook. There could be 100+ issues that a customer is trying to spot, but this playbooking agent can turn that into a matter of minutes. Super excited about it. Another
That's
agent
cool.
that we've launched is around intake. So, one of the ways in which legal teams get an intake request is an email from a salesperson, right? Saying, hey, I've got a contract, I need you to review it. And it doesn't come along with a lot of context. And the legal team has an intake form that they like requesters to use. They're saying, please fill out, when do you need this by? Like, give us context about the size of the deal. How urgent is it? X, Y, and Z questions that the legal team wants to have before they set a timeline, assign somebody to it. And so these emails just bypass that intake form, right? And our intake agent will automatically go back to that requester, parse through the email saying, okay, here's what you did give us. Here's what you didn't. Please answer these other questions. Does all of that grunt work and brings it back and says, okay, now the matter is truly ready to be creative. Let's create that, tee it up for the legal team to now actually start handling. And you can imagine lots of possibilities downstream of that. It's like, once we know what kind of request it is, now we can start to automatically answer certain requests based on knowledge that exists within the company, or transition to contract review if it's a contract review question. So, see lots of opportunities for agents to take these sort of multi-step processes that are otherwise tedious and menial and automate them away so that lawyers can go back to kind of making decisions, providing leadership, exercising judgment.
Sounds really exciting. What else is ahead for the company over the next year, over the next couple of years? What should we be looking for?
Continuing to broaden a variety of ways in which we can serve in-house legal teams primarily. So matter management is part of that offering. We'll have offerings coming out to help manage contracts after they've been signed. We might get into some other spaces too around that. So yeah, I won't give away too much of the product roadmap, but those are a couple of things to look for in the next 3 to 4 months or so. Our North Star is like finding ways to save in-house legal teams time. So any place where we can do that, we see opportunities, and we're being kind of pulled by customers into those. It's one of the things that excited me about LegalOn in the first place, which is like, this is not technology in search of a problem. These are like long-standing problems that technology is now sort of caught up to being able to solve in new ways. And so being able to look at that landscape of the kinds of tasks that in-house teams are doing with fresh eyes and say, hey, the way that you would build a solution for this today looks very different than how you would do it even just 5 years ago. It feels just like a very exciting open space period to be doing technology development for lawyers.
So your entire post-law school professional life has been as a leader. Yeah, I mean, you went right from law school to CEO of a company to leadership role at LexisNexis to now the global CEO of, as you said, a 600 plus employee company. What have you learned about leadership over those years?
There's a lot. That's a tough question.
What's one? Give us one nugget.
So I've led teams now of going, starting from making the first hire of like adding a third person to a team to, hundreds plus. And one of the things that I think is like ongoing is in a management role, you're always dealing with different personalities and people. And that doesn't change. Like everything else changed. Like as a company grows, you go through different stages of whether it's focused on marketing or product or sales, and you're sort of building muscle in these different capacities. But people dynamics and like having the right people on the bus and everybody like rowing in the same direction and aligned and coordinated. Those challenges like change a lot too, and you can never take your eye off of them. And I've come to appreciate that journey a lot more. I'd say like there's people working with me now at LegalOn who work for me at Ravel. And to be able to have that sort of longevity in a working relationship, I've found to be like deeply rewarding. To be able to like see other people progress over a 10-year period and to have that accumulated set of experiences of the good and the bad. That's been a lot of fun. And the piece that I try to advise folks about when they're joining startups is there's two things I think that really set them apart. One is that you will be asked to do a wider variety of things. You'll be given a wider set of responsibilities than you would in a large company, right? Simply by being in a smaller organization, everybody's a bit less specialized. So people get to jumpstart and accelerate the kinds of things that they can take ownership of. And the other thing is there's going to be good days and bad days, and it'll be a bit of a roller coaster. And sometimes those things will happen on the same day. Like, and it's a much faster moving environment than a large organization. And people can feel the impact of what they do more tangibly on a day-to-day basis. They can see the scoreboard and their relation to like putting points on the board a lot more clearly. And so that's it's just a higher stress environment, to be clear.
Yeah.
It's a not for everybody,
Right.
but it does keep you motivated if that's an environment that you thrive in.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure it says something about your leadership style that people who work with you at Ravel are still with you at LegalOn. And you mentioned your advice to people who want to join a startup. What about those who want to start a startup? I mean, has the market really changed since back when you got started? What do you tell somebody today about the potential for starting their own company and gaining a foothold?
I think there's lots of opportunities. I have these conversations pretty regularly with folks who are starting something new and reaching out for advice. And it's a lot of fun to work with folks who have some vision they've cooked up and they're trying to figure out how to take their first steps and build momentum around it and launch it or start to scale it. Like we talked about, I think the last few years have just been a very bubbly time in creating new technology for law. And there's more capital available than there used to be. There's more interest from customers than there used to be. So I think it's generally a good time to start a business, but at the same time, it's harder too in different ways. It's harder to break through. It's harder to like gain attention for new ideas in some ways. But I'm generally, I don't have a crystal ball about what legal practice will look like 10 years from now in large law firms and in small law firms and in serving, individuals and small businesses. But I'm pretty confident that the change we're going to experience in the next 10 years is a lot more than the change that we experienced in the last 10 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, seems likely. Anything else that you'd like to say? I'm always asking you tons of questions, and anything else that you'd like to say about the company or anything else?
No, this has been a fun conversation, Bob. I appreciate it.
Good. And always enjoy talking to you. Thanks a lot for doing it. I appreciate it. Good to see you.
Yeah. Likewise. Good to see you too.
All right. Be well. Thanks for listening to today's show. Hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to share your own thoughts or comments, just please email me at ambrogi@gmail.com or message me on LinkedIn or other social media. If you're a fan of the show, please leave us a review. LawNext is a production of LawNext Media. I'm your host, Bob Ambrogi. I hope you'll join us again next time for another episode of Law Next.